Hello, welcome to another video about writing a fugue. Today I want to show you how you can easily write a nice four-voiced fugue using a countersubject. A simple way to write a countersubject is using only imperfect intervals. Thirds and sixths are most flexible and there's almost no way to let them sound bad. They give the music a nice fluidity. Let me quickly add some ornaments to make two beautiful melodies out of this structural simplex. The last E flat will later help to modulate to the upper fifth, but I will show you that later. Let me add a little variation of the countersubject here. By simply prolonging the F here, I can create a nice dissonance that is prepared and that resolves right afterwards. A variation of the countersubject like that doesn't necessarily have to be done. It's just an idea that works fine for this fugue. In your own fugue, you can do whatever sounds good for you. I will use this second version in the beginning of the fugue. Let's listen to these two voices already once before we start writing the fugue with them. Let's turn them around now. And the best thing is now that it becomes very easy to add another filling voice or even two voices to it, because they themselves sound already pretty complete. So let's get started now. The fugue will have its first entry in the tenor voice. Like that we can build up the entries from the bottom up to the soprano, so that the last entry in the bass voice can conclude the exposition with a very strong and kind of unexpected confirmation by finally completing the full harmony in the bass area. The answer in the alto voice has to be on the fifth degree. So if we started in F major, it now has to be in C major. So in this fugue I will do a tonal answer by changing the first note from G down to F. If I keep the rest, the first interval becomes a third instead of a second. So now the magic begins. By just adding the before prepared countersubject, my second voice is already completely written. And since the two prepared voices modulate to the fourth degree, I don't need to do anything to come back to F major. Like that I can simply add the soprano entry and let the alto voice play the countersubject. It's a little bit like a puzzle. Only the tenor voice is missing now. And here's a little trick again. The two voices, subject and countersubject, are all the time moving in the opposite direction. Like that, a third voice can easily be added by moving in parallel thirds, sixths or tenths to one or the other voice. Let me show this to you. In this situation, I will write the tenor voice a tenth underneath the soprano and keep this interval all the way through the phrase. And done it is. Let's listen to what is written so far and enjoy how the voices slowly build up. Now we need to prepare the entry of the bass voice. Of course, we just could continue with the tonal answer as before, but it makes a much stronger effect if the bass voice brings the original subject in the main tonality of F major. So we need to modulate back. We will do this by the very useful model of a so-called cadenza doppia. A cadence that brings the leading note twice. So I simply have to bring back the leading note E of F major. And that's it for now. I will write the other voices later. After this cadential transition part, I now can write the bass entry and add the countersubject to it. Once again in the alto voice. It doesn't really matter in which voice the countersubject appears now. There are 4 voices and the attention is on the bass, so nobody really cares where it is as long as it appears somewhere. The third voice I will write with a similar technique as before. This time I will write parallel thirds above the upper voice. Before I decide what to do with the fourth voice, let me quickly finish the transition cadenza doppia part. I first add the bass clause, for which I use the rhythmical idea of the subject. And then I add the so-called tenor clause in the upper voice. Now it's time for the fourth voice. Of course, there are many possibilities, but this shall be just a very small fugue, so I decide to don't do anything and just write pauses. So now the full exposition part of the fugue is done. What follows now is a short modulation episode. I will not modulate very far away in this fugue. I think this time it's enough to go to the 5th degree and come back afterwards. So actually the next entry is very similar to the answer of before. Just now I won't need any tonal adjustments. As before, I add the countersubject. The third voice will be parallel tenths again. And the fourth voice pauses once again. I will keep the full 4-part setting for the end of the fugue. You see how it is sometimes possible to fit in some imitations. It's a good idea to plan them ahead and construct the episode part in this way. Anyway, sometimes you are just lucky to find possibilities like that. Since the cadenza doppia of before worked quite well, I can kind of reuse it here to go back to C major. I have to do that because otherwise the construction of the subject and countersubject automatically would bring me back to F major. So the new entry in the bass can be once again in C major. Here I complete the cadenza doppia. And now I add the countersubject again. And as I said, this automatically leads us back to F major. Like that, the recapitulation part in F major simply can be added without any transition. By using the subject before once in the alto and once in the bass voice, now it becomes really effective to bring the ending in the highest register in the soprano voice. In the end, I'm changing the countersubject. Like that, I can smoothly bring the fugue with a cadence to an end. The bass does a 4-5-1 cadence, and the alto just is a filling voice that fits in the missing notes. Now I quickly add the third voice to this entry, again with parallel thirds. The fourth voice pauses again. The same for the last entry, but now I use the full 4-voice setting I promised before. One imitation as before, and it's done. The fugue is finished. Now it's time for a big revelation. This fugue actually wasn't written by me. It is already almost 400 years old. It was written by Johann Caspar Ferdinand Fischer, a composer of the High Baroque era. I showed you this example from the perspective of a composer as a way of analyzing and understanding pieces. You can see from this example, fugues don't have to be incredibly complex. They need a certain craftsmanship with a repertoire of tools, tricks, and of course, experience. Like that, it can become a lot of fun to write and construct a fugue. As I said before, almost like a puzzle. And the result can be really beautiful like this one. Let's listen to it once completely. I hope you enjoyed the video and maybe you got inspired to write your own fugue. Glad you watched so far, and I hope to see you next time.